I just want to go on the record to say plastic is not the problem. Plastic is an incredibly ingenious material that has advanced humanity beyond any other material innovation since the dawn of time. The problem with plastic is how we use it.
It's time to change the world.
There's got to be a better way.
It's time for something better.
You feel like you can't really make a difference, but the fact is that you can.
We're telling the stories of people who are changing the world and how you can help.
We just need more companies that are out there solving these problems.
Businesses, nonprofits, artists, and individuals who have found a problem and then created a solution.
If we want to have real impact, we have to do it together.
You'll come away from every episode with action steps you can take to be part of that solution.
We're never going to feel satisfied and happy if we just stay the same.
We can each change the world every single day.
People can actually come together and build a future for themselves along with other people.
Our daily actions have a massive impact. So what will we do about it? We can remake the world. Because guess what? We can. Hi everyone. I'm Nathan Gardner, and this is We Can Remake the World. We're telling the stories of people who are changing the world and how you can help. Today, we're excited to share our second guest episode, and what a guest we have for you today. I mean, talk about a person and a company that's changing the world. I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about how I came across this company and why I've been a loyal customer and supporter over the last couple of years. So for me, it started with this video I saw a few years ago. It went viral. I don't know if any of you remember this, but this video showed a sea turtle that was in a boat with some ocean researchers, and the sea turtle had something stuck in its nose. The research team had pulled the sea turtle up into their boat so that they could try to free whatever was stuck in the sea turtle's nostril. The research team was led by graduate student Christine Figener, who was filming. The researchers were really struggling to remove whatever was stuck in the sea turtle's nose, but eventually they were able to pull it out. And it was, well...
He bit on it and he said it's plastic. Is it a straw? Don't tell me it's a freaking straw.
Yeah.
It's a freaking straw up her freaking nostril.
A plastic straw. A straw that had gotten wedged into the sea turtle's nose. The reason this was surprising is because the turtle's nostril is very small, and somehow this straw had gotten compacted down so that it got stuck in there. It's not easy to watch, to be honest, and I remember having this major light bulb moment about plastic, and straws specifically, and what they must be doing to the environment. I thought of all the hundreds of disposable plastic products, straws included, that I had used over my lifetime, many of them so small and very likely causing all kinds of problems in the ocean, and it was horrifying to realize. Which is why I was so excited when I saw this hilarious ad from a company I'd never heard of at the time called Final Straw. This ad featured a sassy mermaid who was flopping around in a wheelchair, telling everyone that they need to suck responsibly by using a reusable straw that this company was selling. I have never forgotten that ad. It was so funny, so lighthearted, about something that was actually pretty intense. I was hooked. I bought my first Final Straw on the spot. I went right to their website, and I've used mine hundreds of times since. I've gotten more in different colors. It's a great product, and it's really making an impact. We were lucky enough to speak with Emma Rose Cohen, CEO and founder of Final Straw. Emma is so smart, really funny, passionate, so informed, and she and her company Final Straw are already changing the world by helping consumers like you and I to stop from sucking irresponsibly. In other words, to stop using single-use plastic straws. Emma wants to see all of us make a commitment to keep our oceans cleaner by using the beautiful reusable products that Final Straw creates. Before we get to our interview, we'll spend a couple minutes exploring the current situation around disposable plastic, where things stand now. We'll then talk with Emma about why it's so easy to ignore our waste, why we have to stop ignoring it, and what we can do to keep our planet and wildlife healthy. From now on, it's actually pretty simple if we just take the right steps. Plastic is everywhere. And no, I don't just mean in your house. It's literally everywhere. In oceans, lakes, rivers, and even our drinking water. It's in our clothes, in our food, in our wildlife, and it's not going away anytime soon unless we make some big new choices. As time goes on and our use of plastic grows, the amount of it in our environment grows as well, for obvious reasons, but there's really one big reason. What's that? One word: disposables. Single-use plastic is filling trash cans around the world every day, and many of us believe that there are systems in place to deal with that plastic so that it doesn't collect and cause harm to our planet. But what really happens after you've tossed your iced coffee into the trash bin with that shiny disposable plastic straw you've used with it is a little more complex. It turns out we're not as good at the reusing and recycling part of the 3 Rs as we've thought. Science magazine estimated in 2015 that between 4.8 to 12.7 million metric tons of plastic waste enters the ocean every year, and that number has only increased since. In 2016, the World Economic Forum produced a plastics study that showed that we are dumping at least one full garbage truck of plastic into the ocean every single minute. And if we continue using disposable plastic as much as we are currently, that number could double to 2 garbage trucks full of plastic being dumped into the ocean every minute by 2030. What do all these numbers mean? Well, plastic is a problem, and it's a growing problem. Our recycling system isn't as good as our 3rd grade teachers wanted us to believe, in fact. And as we'll hear from our guest today, Emma Rose Cohen, CEO and founder of Final Straw, only a fraction of the plastic we put into recycling bins actually gets a second life. And almost no plastic gets a 3rd or 4th life. Emma began her journey into sustainability and conservation by dressing up as a mermaid and organizing beach cleanups in her home of California. And as Emma traveled and saw the plastic problem on beaches around the world, she decided to do something about it. And she created the world's first collapsible, reusable straw so that sucking responsibly could become an option for all of us. Emma is a walking sustainability library. Her knowledge of our plastic problem and how to solve it is huge, and her passion for solving it was evident during our entire conversation. For those of you who haven't come across Final Straw yet, they're changing the game in sustainability, and we're so glad to be telling their story. Thanks so much for joining me today, Emma.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nathan.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. What is Final Straw?
So Final Straw is a reusable, collapsible straw that goes on your keychain. So it was the first portable straw in the market so that instead of having to bring a large, bulky, reusable straw with you, you can bring a small, compact, convenient straw and take it everywhere you go and avoid single-use plastic.
What inspired you to create Final Straw?
So I have kind of an obsessive personality, and when I get something in my mind, I can never let it go. So when I was in college, I was surrounded by, the drinking culture and the red Solo cups and just kind of the general waste, I think, that happens on college campuses. And one day I was just walking down the street and looking around, and there's trash everywhere. And it's like, you're on this campus to hire your education, to figure out your place in the world and hopefully get back to communities. And I just it just hit me really hard. Like, what am I doing? And like, why could I be so conscious in so many ways in my life, but then so unconscious around the waste that I'm producing? So that's kind of how I got obsessed with plastic. And then, eventually my girlfriends and I, we dressed up like mermaids just for fun. And we decided to do a beach cleanup one day. So we're dressed up as mermaids doing a beach cleanup, and it was so much fun. And we got all these other people involved, and everyone was like, really high vibes, and just loved that, there's so much energy with, us and doing something that's like good for the earth, but also fun, which eventually inspired us to start Save the Mermaids, where we would dress up like mermaids, do beach cleanups and after school programs with kids. And so that's really where I found my voice in sustainability, and where I found that it can be fun, it can be sexy, it can be sparkly. It doesn't have to just be, kind of cookie cutter granola, which is what a lot of us have experienced in the past. So after that, I got focused in on straws due to a trip to Thailand, and they were just everywhere. And so I ended up doing a TEDx talk on straws. And I thought for the longest time that the way to solve the, single-use plastic straw issue is to just get everyone to stop using them. So I stopped using straws, and I would, straw shame, and it was just like this whole thing. And then I realized, through creating this company, that it's okay if people want to use a straw. We just have to provide sustainable, convenient, fun to use alternatives. And so that's kind of where this idea was born.
That's great. I think making it easy for people to solve some of the problems that we're facing is the key, without, like you said, shaming folks or expecting them to just abandon part of their lives. It's like, okay, well, what's the solution? Somebody needs to just create a solution that's viable and that people can get excited about.
Exactly.
Would you speak a bit more about that tendency that I think is easy to fall into, to be sort of out of sight, out of mind about our waste? Absolutely.
I mean, I think the semantics that we use around waste are part of the problem. When we say we're throwing something away has this like mythical significance, and we assume that it is dealt with elsewhere. And I mean, even taking that step of assuming it's dealt with somewhere is beyond what most people think with trash. When you throw something away, you never think about it again. It leaves your hand and goes into some ethereal existence. But what everyone is coming to realize now is that there is no way, and that our trash always has a place, and that place is probably in someone else's backyard. Up until January of 2018, we shipped all of our recycling to China. China said, we're sick of it, because in the US, we do single stream recycling, which means that everything goes into one bin, which means there's super high contamination rates. Back when we used to sort things into different bins, you had much higher quality items because everything went in one place, and you had way less what I call wish cycling, which is people throwing things in the recycling bin that aren't actually recyclable, but they wish they were. It makes us feel better. So once China stopped taking our recycling, we had nowhere for it to go. So now there's this, way more press and awareness around recycling because it's all being sent to landfill. So right now, if you're recycling 3 through 7 plastic, which is the little number that's on the recycling symbol, there is no point. It is going straight to the landfill. Do not waste your time. Do not contaminate recycling streams, because there's no outlet for it. It's a very low quality plastic that we just don't have any outlet for right now until we build the necessary infrastructure.
I'm totally guilty of wish cycling, I'm ashamed to say.
We all are. It's like, I mean, I know better, and I still find myself like standing in front of the trash bin in the recycling bin with like a number 3 plastic, and I'm just like, no, like this should turn into something else, because it's possible. It's just really complex, because every type of plastic is like a cake, and a different flavor cake. So basically what we're doing is we're taking all of these cakes, mushing them all together, and then trying to separate them back out into their, individual ingredients. And it's like, you can't combine a red velvet cake and a devil's food cake together and then separate them back out to their, individual cakes.
That's such a clear analogy, and that's so helpful. What do you see as some of the solutions as far as getting better at recycling?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I read somewhere recently that only 10% or maybe maximum 20% of our plastic is actually recycled and used again. Would you speak about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually 9% of plastic is recycled, and then less than 1% is recycled more than once. The most interesting part of that statistic is that less than 1% of plastic gets a second, life, or a third life.
Wow.
Because we're all shown the recycling symbol. The recycling symbol is a visual representation of infinity. It looks like it goes around and around and around forever. And so I think that's what we're taught when we're little. And those lessons are ingrained in how we behave. Everyone wants to do the right thing. Everyone wants to do what's best for the earth. But what needs to happen is there's a few things. First of all, standardization of materials, so that, right now, like, not every number 1 plastic is the same, because you've got all of these different plasticizers, additives, colorants. And so every time you're recycling, you're lowering the quality. So if all the companies came together, all the large companies, you've got Nestle, Pepsi, Coke, Unilever, and said, hey guys, let's all work together to standardize our formulas so that we can make recycling more efficient. And that's kind of step one. Step two is extended manufacturer responsibility, which actually, like, I guess you could say that's maybe step one, because that's what creates the incentives for companies to do this. And basically what extended manufacturer responsibility is that every product that you create as a company, you are responsible for the end of life. So it would really change the way we build products. Things, especially electronics, aren't built to be recycled. They're built to be small, and that's great. And everyone loves their small iPhone. But when it comes to, breaking an iPhone down and extracting the most valuable components, it's incredibly difficult. And, the same thing happens with our electronic waste is with our recycling. It gets sent overseas. It gets disassembled in incredibly unsafe environments. People are doing this by hand, using caustic chemicals to mine out the precious metals. And there's entire cities in Africa and India and China where this is happening, and the water is undrinkable. The cancer rates are through the roof. So the problem is that end of life isn't really in consideration for most companies when they're designing a product. They're designing based on, what they think consumers want, style, function. And yet what really needs to be taken into account is how are we going to deal with these materials and bring them back into the circular economy?
Do you think that awareness, consumer awareness, is sort of the most powerful action step to make companies become more conscious of end of life for their products? How do we start that conversation more effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's twofold. I think, consumers are certainly demanding companies change. I mean, this new generation is completely shifting. And you'll see, every single large company now has a sustainability section on their website. So they know this is what people want. There's definitely a lot of greenwashing going on, which is, pretending to be green without really having a sizable impact. But I think that as consumers keep asking questions and demanding that materials have a proper outlet, things are shifting. The other aspect is legislation, which I think is super important. And that's what is difficult about this, is because it turns it into a partisan issue when it's not. All humans live on Earth. This is our one planet. And it shouldn't be, Democrats versus Republicans on whether we should save our home or not. But it has turned into that because, Republicans in general don't like any sort of governmental regulation. But ultimately, the human race has proven that we can't be left to, our own devices. There's just too much greed in the world. So we need legislation mandating, the kind of materials that people can put into things. I mean, you look at Prop 67, which requires labeling of carcinogenic materials on items. And that's changed the complete landscape for how products are labeled in the entire United States. Because if you're not Prop 67 compliant, you can't sell in California. And California is one of the biggest, consumers.
What I love is that I feel like plastic straws have almost become the canary in the coal mine. I mean, Seattle implemented their legislation so that plastic straws would be banned, which I think is partly what inspired Starbucks to ban plastic straws in all of their stores by next year, by 2020. And do you see plastic straws as being sort of the first domino to fall for single-use plastic, and then for the greater conversation around waste?
Absolutely. And, it's funny because a lot of the I talk to people about what I do, and they're like, straws make up 0.000, nothing % of waste. I'm like, yeah, that's not the point. The point is that through using the straw as, this symbol of waste, we've been able to spread so much awareness and get people thinking, because all you have to do is get the awareness up. Because as soon as you start thinking differently about your waste, you can't stop. Like it's just like your eyes are opened and they can't be shut anymore. So then you start thinking differently about all the other items. It's not just about straws, like I never started this company to rid the world of plastic straws. I started this company to raise awareness around single-use plastics and get people thinking differently about waste in general. The straw just happens to be, one of the more wasteful items. The kind of community that's been gathering around single-use plastics, we've tried for a decade to ban plastic bags. And it's been so difficult because you've got, the American Chemical Council fighting legislation. They bring their lawyers to these, city council meetings. And so the straw has kind of been the first item that hasn't really been fought by the plastics companies. And so it's been really successful. And just as you said, the legislation inspired corporate buy-in. So you had legislation go through, not mandating, specific companies, but then the companies like Starbucks, IKEA, Alaska Airlines, Marriott, they see this as a consumer demand. They want to get out in front of it. And so instead of saying, we'll wait till these legislations, affect us, they're moving forward quickly to change their own practices.
And speaking of Alaska Airlines, I found when I was researching that they have now stopped using disposable plastics on their airline, but in 1 year, they used 22 billion plastic coffee stir sticks and citrus picks. And just to give listeners a sense of the scale of what's at stake here, could you speak a bit to what happens to these plastics as they sit in the ocean and how that affects our ecosystem for animals, for wildlife, and also for us?
The problem with plastic is that it doesn't biodegrade. Instead, it photodegrades into lots of tiny little pieces that absorb toxic chemicals. So when you go out into the ocean and you hear these stories about, the islands of plastic, they're actually not generally visible to the naked eye because they're below the water and the plastic breaks down in the presence of light. So it's actually way more dangerous to have these really small particles versus the larger ones because they're getting consumed by animals at the basis of the food chain. So they're about the same size as plankton, and they're bioaccumulating up the food chain, which means that they're increasing in density as it gets higher and higher into the foods that we're eating. We're eating fish from the oceans. Additionally, we've got the microfiber release, which is happening from clothing. So every time you wash clothing made from a synthetic fiber, it releases lots of tiny little pieces of plastic, which are accumulating in our water system because they are too small to be filtered out. So it's not just in the oceans, it's the water that we're watering our plants with, feeding animals that we're eating. And these are, really dangerous chemicals. And we don't even know the full extent of the effects on human health because this is a pretty new problem.
I hadn't thought about that before, just polyester and the microplastics that are inevitable there. One thing I think that is another sort of point of inspiration is the fact that it almost seems to me like a single video of a sea turtle having a plastic straw being pulled painfully out of its nose that went viral really launched this conversation around straws and therefore the larger conversation. Do you see social media as a viable venue for really rocketing awareness and holding these companies more accountable through, consumer demands?
Absolutely. I think social media is so amazing in that it gives everyone a voice and everyone has, an equally weighted voice. Whether you have 1 million followers or 100, you still can influence your community and take a position on these things. I think that we've got these new sustainability rock stars. Greta Thunberg is leading the charge and really inspiring people to use their own voice, to stand in the streets and take a stand on these issues because we have to. We're in a place where we're doing irreversible damage on our environment. And, it's tough because I think a lot of people, they want the easy answers. We want to figure out how to fix it. And it's not going to be easy. We can't just go out and do beach cleanups. We need to turn the tap off. The bathtub is overflowing, and no matter how many times we take a teaspoon and dip it in to do our little cleanup efforts, it doesn't matter because we're still dumping the plastic into the ocean at alarming rates.
As somebody who's really steeped in a lot of these problems and solutions, what are a couple recommendations that you would make to somebody to just clearly, start to turn it around within their sphere of influence, so that those who feel overwhelmed by the problem, they can say, okay, these are 1 to 2 action steps I can take right now?
I would say the 3 kind of or 4 easiest items to remove and just say no to. And this is tough because, I'm pretty prepared, and I always try and keep everything I want on me at all times so I can avoid single-use plastic. But when I don't have, say my reusable cutlery or my coffee mug, I just don't get, a coffee. And it's like, I think that we have to start really setting boundaries for ourselves and making promises. And so I would say, for single-use plastics, it's really, really easy to remove straws, utensils, bags, and coffee cups. And those are items that I have made a commitment to. I will never use them. And if I don't have my reusable alternative with me, I just go without. And that's kind of, or sit at a coffee shop and drink a coffee in a for here container. It's really common that I'll hear someone go to the store and say, oh, I forgot my bags. And then they get the single-use bags. And it's like you're training your brain when you do that it's not an important action that needs to be taken. So the way we are able to implement habits is by, sticking to them at all times and not rewarding ourselves for forgetting. So when you forget, you have to, it's not necessarily a punishment, but if you go without, then you're not going to get that kind of dopamine hit when you do the wrong behavior.
Sure. You were speaking earlier about the voice that we all have through social media, which I agree can be so powerful. One of the things I love about Final Straw is your marketing point of view. It's really funny, it's really playful, and I think it's refreshing to see a company that's sustainability minded sort of using some more tongue-in-cheek techniques. Can you talk about how that started and, how intentional was that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was 100% intentional. And I kind of, was speaking earlier about my time when we started Save the Mermaids and how I just saw the reaction that we had to just being ourselves and keeping it fun and light and encouraging and inspiring, versus kind of finger wagging and going more of the traditional route. So from experiencing that to creating this company, that was always, that's just a huge part of who I am. I'm silly and weird. I love memes. I like to have fun, and I don't want to create a company that doesn't kind of embody that. So I think that it's much easier to change the world while you're having fun versus trying to change it and making it really difficult on yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I would really be curious to hear about how Final Straws are produced. Do you intentionally use recycled materials where you can in your manufacturing? Do you have a relationship with your producers? Would you share a bit about that aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I FaceTime with our manufacturer pretty much every day. So we have a very close relationship. We're always working to optimize materials, ensure that quality control is really high, and use the most sustainable materials possible. We get a lot of comments about the case being out of plastic. It is recycled plastic, but people have a stigma against plastic in general. I just want to go on the record to say plastic is not the problem. Plastic is an incredibly ingenious material that has advanced humanity beyond any other material innovation since the dawn of time. The problem with plastic is how we use it. It's a material that's designed to last forever. And when we use it once and throw it away, it is not, that's not what it's supposed to be made for. So, plastic is lightweight, it's inexpensive, it's easy to produce. If you can create circularity around it, you can recycle it forever. So we do have a take back system for our cases where if something breaks or goes wrong or you don't want it, we'll take it back and regrind it for future cases. The other materials that we chose, we use a 304 stainless for the straw. That's, high quality rust resistant stainless steel. And then the inner tube is silicone and and that, allows for elasticity, and the entire straw is rated for 2 uses a day for 15 years. So it's, built to last you forever, because otherwise we're not solving a problem.
I love that you have a point of view that plastic is a huge resource. And if you look around and you see how ubiquitous it is, of course it is. So as a relatively small company, you are still putting in the effort to be focused on quality control and sourcing. What do you say to these large companies who paint a picture that it's not cost effective or not feasible for them to make the changes required to align with sustainability goals?
I think it's difficult for a lot of these large companies. They're trying to bake sustainability in now as an afterthought. And it really does need to be built into the DNA of an organization. When you come along and try and add sustainability on top, it doesn't really work. It needs to be a core principle. So when you establish sustainability as a core principle, and as everything you do comes from there, it becomes much easier. And you then develop the triple bottom line, which is people, planet, profit, which kind of completely changes the function of the business and the purpose. For a lot of large companies, the expectation is that shareholder returns, which doesn't ultimately benefit the triple bottom line. So that needs to be restructured. And then, yes, sustainability always has upfront cost, but I would say 95% of the time, there is an ROI over time. So I worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory for 5 years before starting this company in the waste minimization department. And every project we did, we would look at upstream waste reduction, and it would always cost us a lot to get there. But we kind of had a tight limit on which kind of projects we could undertake. But if we could hit a return on investment at 5 years or less, we could get approved. And we did a ton of projects throughout the lab because you would start making money once your initial investment was recouped.
That must have been an amazing training ground for you as an entrepreneur. Did you always have sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, or do you think your passion for sustainability really launched you into where you are now?
Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur since day one. My first business when I was like 7 years old was picking up fruit around my neighborhood, and then I'd go sell it at the farmer's market. So, it's kind of like a waste minimization business from the beginning, but I never really looked at it like that until now. And then all through college, I would just always make my own careers. I made jewelry for a while. I did hair feathers when that was a thing. So, I've always liked working on my own schedule and solving problems and filling a need. But this is my first real company. And so that's kind of, it's a lot because there's a lot more going on. We've got employees and there's a lot more on the line, but it's exciting and very challenging.
Would you describe a bit some of your experience going on that journey from idea for a product and conception to actually creating it, manufacturing it? What was that process like for you?
It was a lot of guessing and testing. So we started working on Final Straw in October of 2017, in about 2 years. And then I quit my job in January of 2018 and went full straw. For the Kickstarter campaign, which was how we launched the company, I spent about 3.5, 4 months exclusively building the audience for the campaign, creating the social media, building the brand voice and aesthetic. And my business partner at the time was working more on the product and getting that dialed. So when we launched the Kickstarter, we had a prototype that we basically made ourselves, and we just happened to nail the timing and did incredibly well on Kickstarter because it was right at the time where everyone started talking about straws, and we were the first people to say, here's a straw that's really easy to carry and bring with you everywhere you go.
I remember that, actually. I remember thinking this product is coming at the exact right moment. When I first heard about Final Straw, it was pretty incredible how perfect that timing was. What guidance would you give to somebody who has an idea for a sustainably minded company or an impact-driven company based on your experiences and some of the lessons that you've learned? What advice would you offer?
Okay, so I have a few things I would say. First of all, don't listen to anyone who tells you that it's not going to do well. When I was launching this company, I showed the straw to all of my friends, and everyone was like, cool straw, but like not a single person thought it would, do what it has done. So if people tell you that it's not going to do well, or that there's no place in the market for it, don't listen. Even people who really know what they're doing. We went on Shark Tank and they said, this product is going to be too hard to get people to change their behavior. And they were wrong. So that's that. But what you do need to listen to are tests. And so I test everything that we do when I first started out to really see what our consumers responded to the best. I always keep my personal aesthetic, but I also will alter it based on the responses that we get. So test, and build an audience. And that's where I at least knew that some people were going to love what we were doing, because through starting the social media page and getting a lot of feedback, I found out that this was something that people were interested in, despite, my close circle not necessarily understanding what the purpose of the product was.
I think your first point is so important for anybody who has a purpose-driven idea, because inevitably there are going to be systems that are going to need to change for some of these things to take hold. And so holding true to your vision and not being deterred is so important.
Yeah. And also understanding that timing is the number one indicator of success in any business. So, if you're working on something and it's not successful, it may not be because it's not a good idea. It's just that it's not ready. So, either that means waiting for the right time or creating the right time by working with other people and trying to spread the movement beyond your kind of immediate circle.
Not to add to the complexity of your day-to-day life, but given the success of Final Straw to date, does the company have any plans to move beyond straws into tackling other single-use products?
I'm so glad you asked that. Of course, yes. We are really excited to expand the line, and I've been working on our fork for about a year and a half now. It's, definitely really challenging to make products. There's just so many tiny things that need to be taken into consideration. And, it's also like, I feel like I'm under the pressure because Final Straw was so successful and is so amazing that I need to knock this one out of the park. So really excited for Final Fork. The percent of people that use straws is tiny, and the percent of people that uses forks is 100, basically, maybe 99 for babies or something. But, I think that Final Straw was the foot in the door. It got people feeling differently about taking responsibility for carrying the items that they want to have on them to ensure that they don't need to use single-use plastic. And I hope that Final Fork can be an extension to that, and then also have a larger audience, because straws are mostly female. Our demographic is 73% female, and I want that to change. I want sustainability to be something that every single person is thinking about and incorporating into their daily lives.
Off the top of your head, how many Final Straws have been sold to date?
About 350,000.
With quick math, how many disposable straws does that mean have been prevented from entering the environment?
Yeah, so I actually made a really fun Excel chart the other day to calculate that, and it's about 70 million, which was shocking.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I had to redo the math like 5 times because I was like, there's no way that's the actual number. And it was one of the most exciting numbers I've ever seen. Just like, I started this company to make a change and to see that we are making numbers that are that huge just by giving people alternatives to single-use plastic is so exciting. I think that we've proven that people are really looking for alternatives and tools that they can use to reduce their single-use plastic, and that, we just need more companies that are out there solving these problems, and they're, the consumer base is ready and waiting.
And how many years has Final Straw been operating?
Since April of 2018, so about a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, I think, it's empowering and exciting to know that it is very possible to make the changes, and, the ripple effect is real. And what we see is that consumers are not only buying the straws, but they're sharing it with their friends. And every time you pull out a straw in a bar, it sparks a conversation, because it's pretty remarkable to watch this thing assemble, and the sound and the whole thing. So you end up making friends, talking about plastic pollution and raising awareness every single time you use it. It's very cool.
And I think it also, again, speaks to the perfection of the straw as the start to this single-use plastic conversation, because it's small, it's portable. A solution like Final Straw is easily taken everywhere. And if we can just come up with solutions that are as creative and exciting and easy as that, then we can make huge change in a really small amount of time.
Exactly. The possibilities are endless, and the ripples are much more powerful than we'll ever know. And to hear, individual stories, because it's like I can look at these numbers all day and they don't really pull on my heartstrings the same way as hearing a story of how someone was at the UN meeting in New York and met another person from Burkina Faso that had a Final Straw, like that kind of stuff. This is a global movement, and everyone out there is looking for ways to get better.
Honestly, I can't think of a much better note to end on.
How incredible is it that Final Straw has been able to prevent over 70 million plastic straws from entering our oceans in less than 2 years? That's just from one company focused on one product. I can't wait to see some of the other products that Final will be launching this year, like the Final Fork and others. And it's so encouraging to see how quickly this conversation around straws has led to so many other reusable solutions. You see reusable straws more and more these days in bars and restaurants and shops that sell them. How amazing would it be to just check straws off the list of polluters for good? Disposable straws are a thing of the past. It's possible if we just keep sticking to reusable options and sustainable options. Which brings us to our first takeaway from today's conversation, our first changemaker. We've got 3 for you. Changemaker number 1, the straw is a symbol, a first step. As Emma herself said, are we going to solve the plastic problem entirely by getting rid of just plastic straws? No. But the conversation around straws has opened a door to a much-needed larger conversation around the waste that we're producing. We're looking at more and more creative ways to lessen the amount of impact that our waste has on our environment, so that we can clean up the damage that's already been done instead of adding to it. Tackling straws as a first step is a way to say, okay, we acknowledge the plastic problem and we're going to do what we can right now to make it smaller. Changemaker number 2. Plastic is not the problem. It's how we use it. This is one of my favorite points that Emma makes, because at first it almost feels counterintuitive, but if you think about it, it makes so much sense. Plastic is an amazing resource. There's a reason that we find it everywhere, in homes and hospitals, our cars. Plastic actually serves us really well. But as Emma said, when we take a material that's actually designed to last forever and create disposable products with it, that's when we have a problem. Thankfully, the solution is actually simple. Just make a new choice to no longer use or tolerate disposable plastics. Don't buy them, don't interact with them at all if possible, so that there's no more demand for them and they stop being made. It's a big choice in a world full of plastic, but it is a choice that we get to make for ourselves. Nobody can take that choice away from us. And changemaker number 3, recycling is not the answer. This was a big one for me. If I could count all of the times that I have wish cycled in my life, thrown something that I thought should be recyclable into a recycling bin, not really sure if it actually would be recycled, well, I don't think I'd actually want to count that number or to know how often I've done that, because it would be huge. Unfortunately, recycling as it exists right now is simply not the answer. As Final Straw points out on their website, when in doubt, throw it out. trashing plastics is actually better for recycling systems than trying to prove a point to yourself or somebody else by tossing everything into the recycling bin, assuming that somebody will do the right thing. We've got to focus on the other two R's, reduce and reuse. Final Straw actually says on social media to reduce, reuse, and refuse, which kind of has a nice ring to it and makes a much bigger dent in the plastic problem. If our system is only able to recycle 9% of plastic, and less than 1% of plastic is recycled more than once, then clearly that system's not the best path forward to really make this change that we need. Another thing I learned is that every single plastic product must be labeled with a number, which tells you which type of plastic it is and if it can be recycled. We want to make your plastic-free life easier, so we've collaborated with Final Straw to create a super fancy and colorful guide to recycling for you. This is focused on plastic. You can download it for free at wecanremaketheworld.com, and it'll teach you about each type of plastic, what it's made out of, and what we can do to turn this whole plastic problem around when it comes to understanding our recycling systems better and making better choices. Here's a not-so-fun fact I picked up while researching for my interview with Emma. Did you know that coffee cups are actually lined with plastic and can't be recycled as paper? Ever wonder how the cup keeps your hot coffee or tea from seeping into the paper cup and burning your hand? Yeah, that's a plastic coating. Recycling coffee cups is extremely difficult for this reason, and requires a special machine to separate the plastic from the paper. Most communities don't have this machine. So the easiest solution here is to bring your own mug. So next time you're at your local cafe, say, "No thank you. I've got my own cup." I would guess that the people who refuse disposables on a regular basis, who always have reusables on them, are probably in the minority. But what if that changed? What if all of us just started to say, "No thank you" more? No thank you to that plastic bag. No thank you to that paper bag. Yes, paper is more easily recycled, but who needs it? I've got my own reusable bag here. No thank you. No thank you to that coffee cup. I've got my own. No thank you to that straw. I've got one here. No thanks for the plastic fork. I've got a bamboo fork or some other kind of reusable fork here in my bag. No thank you. Here are some numbers for you. If just 10 people starting tomorrow started to say no thank you to bags, straws, coffee cups, and cutlery that are disposable over the next year, we would stop 15,000 plastic bags from entering the environment. We would stop almost 6,000 plastic straws from entering the environment. Those 10 people alone would stop 7,300 coffee cups and almost 15,000 pieces of plastic cutlery from being made and used and entering the environment. Those are just for 10 people over 1 year. Now imagine if 100 people made this choice. 1,000 people. 10,000 people. That's millions of plastic bags, plastic straws, plastic coffee cups that aren't entering the environment. There's power in these three simple words. No thank you. And this is how we change the world. By giving voice to the options we have to create positive change and then normalizing it so that everyone looks around and says, why wouldn't we do that? It's so easy, so simple. It just makes sense. I can do that. But a few of us have to be the first to raise our hands and say, enough is enough. It can be uncomfortable to stand out and make demands and, decline something that's seen as normal. But saying no thank you, even if others might not understand where you're coming from at first, is worth a little discomfort, don't you think? To know that you've made a difference in your way? If every one of us had reusable straws, bags, cutlery, and coffee cups, our waste would go down massively if we just take that one step with those 4 disposables. And that's our challenge for today, the 4 Reusables Challenge. Of the 4 most common reusables, disposable cutlery, disposable coffee mugs, disposable straws, and disposable bags, pick one and avoid it no matter what for the next 2 weeks, until our next episode. Or avoid it from now on. Avoid it for the next year. Avoid all 4 if that's the commitment that you want to make. But for today's challenge, choose what makes sense for you and commit to it, at least for the next 2 weeks. See how difficult or how easy it is for you to cut plastic straws out of your day, disposable coffee mugs, plastic bags, or plastic forks. Start to become more aware of the plastic that you use and start to understand how easy it is to replace it with something that's reusable. If you're curious about Final Straw and haven't seen one in action, I highly recommend that you check them out at finalstraw.com. I buy them as gifts for everyone, and there's not a single person who doesn't love it. And don't forget about Final Straw's commitment to staying true to their name. This is meant to be your final straw. The straw itself is really durable, and the case should last forever, and if it doesn't, Final Straw will reuse it and get a new one to you. Look out for Final Fork coming soon and other products coming out of Final Straw, and check them out on social media for some welcome chuckles and sassy mermaids at Final Straw on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Post your Final Straw moments on social media, give us a shout out, give Final Straw a shout out, and start the conversation where you are. Inspire others with your no thank you moments. Those 3 words, no thank you, could be the start of something big to address our waste problem once and for all. Every time you say them, you're making a difference. Thanks again for being here with us today. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to hear more stories like this one to get even more informed and inspired, tell people about us. Subscribe to We Can Remake the World on Apple Podcasts or whatever listening platform you use. Leave us a review, which helps to spread the word and get other people listening. Give us a rating. And check us out at wecanremaketheworld.com for news about new episodes, updates, and resources to help you follow through on the solutions that we lay out on every episode. Our Ending Disposables guide, which we created with Final Straw, is live on the site now. Go check it out. Give it a download, share it with friends, and start a much-needed conversation. We're out to create a platform for all of us to inspire each other, so that none of us feels alone or small or powerless regarding the problems that we face. We want to shine a light on the choices we have to bring a new and better world into focus, and small daily action steps to shrink these problems, person by person, are the first step. Let's keep telling these stories of people who are changing the world, until those old stories of all the ways we've been struggling and failing become the exception rather than the norm. I'm Nathan Gardner, and this is We Can Remake the World. Because guess what? We can. Big thank you to Emma for joining us today, and to the Final Straw team for collaborating with us on our plastics recycling guide. They're such an awesome group of people. We learned so much from speaking with Emma, and hope you did too. Join us for our next episode. We'll talk with Teddy from New York City, who's changing the world with gratitude. Gratitude? Can gratitude really change the world? Tune in to find out. Thanks again.